Have you ever wondered what it would be like to live in trendy parts of Manhattan or Brooklyn? What the vibes would be like, what the price would cost, and ultimately which neighborhood would work best for you? In this episode, I'll be sharing everything that I learned from touring 20 plus apartments in both lower Manhattan as well as Brooklyn. And I'll be sharing advice and tips on how you can navigate the apartment search. Hi, I'm Nicole, a 30-something-year-old professional living in New York. And for a little bit of context, I am moving by the end of this year. This is going to be part 2 of my New York City apartment hunting series. In part 1, I visited some options in the Lower East Side as well as Nolita. As much as I love how cool and edgy the Lower East Side was, it was just a little too edgy and a little too busy for my taste. I preferred a neighborhood that was a little bit more charming, that was a little bit more neighborhoody, and so Nolita really fit the bill. We decided to focus on that this time around, as well as similar neighborhoods as the West Village. We even threw in parts of Brooklyn into the mix, so we looked at places in Dumbo as well as downtown Brooklyn. I've got some advice that I would recommend keeping in mind if you are seriously going to be apartment hunting. So the first thing is income and credit score requirements. You will need an annual income of 40 times your monthly rent. That's just kind of the basic requirement, as well as a credit score that's at least 650 or above. If you don't meet the income requirement, there is an option where you can have a guarantor. This is basically somebody that will co-sign the lease with you and say that they will pay the rent if you can't. The catch here is that they need to be making 80 times the monthly rent in terms of annual salary. The second thing is to essentially have all your paperwork prepped ahead of time. It was a huge help to basically just have everything ready to go in a Google Drive folder that I could then just go ahead and send over to an agent when I was ready to apply to an apartment. Not only is the New York City rental market extremely competitive, but it is also very involved. I like to joke that it's as difficult to get an apartment in New York as it is to buy a home because there's so much paperwork involved. So do yourself a favor and just take care of it at the beginning. Key documents to prep are your last 2 to 3 months of bank statements, as well as your last 2 to 3 months of pay stubs and your last at least 2 years of W-2 tax returns. A pro tip in the application is to also include a cover letter. It gives you the ability to emphasize the fact that not only are you somebody who can pay rent on time, but you also have good communication skills and will not become a problem tenant for the landlord. Every landlord wants to see that, especially in a market like New York City, where rental laws are so much in favor of the tenant. So the next piece of advice I have for you is basically to decide if you are going to be looking during peak or off-peak season. During peak season, this usually is from May to September. This is during the busiest time in the rental market. New grads who are flooding the market to find their first apartment in New York, and you've also got students who are coming into the area to start their next semester of school. It is one of the busiest times to be looking for an apartment, but one of the pros of looking during this time is you have access to more inventory and more quality inventory. This is just when leases come up for renewal and folks are switching apartments, and there's just more options to consider as a result. During off-peak season, this is usually from November until March. Things are a little slower. There's not as many leases coming up for renewal. What this leads to is a couple of pros: less competition as well as lower rental prices or room for negotiation. On the drawback side, you get less inventory and less quality inventory. So basically, think of all the odd layouts that we saw in the previous vlog. It's because that's just what's on the market and has been sitting for a while. You just have to know and be aware that there are going to be more duds during that time. Truthfully, I really like off-peak season. I snatched up a pretty great deal, and I think it had everything to do with the timing of it, where it came on the market during peak season. It was just priced a little too high, and it sat on the market, and I was able to snatch it and even negotiate a little bit more for better rent. The last piece of advice I have for you is essentially to get clear on your criteria. A pro tip here is, instead of trying to find a good deal, get clear on what really matters to you, because it's unlikely that you're gonna find a good deal that someone else won't also come across. So for us, our non-negotiables were to be in a safe neighborhood and to be very close to a couple of subway lines that would take us to other parts of the city or Brooklyn. It was important that the subways would be like no more than a 5 to 7 minute walk from where we lived, simply because we knew we wanted to go and explore other parts of the city, and that was going to be a critical part of having a great experience in New York. Other non-negotiables that we had were laundry had to be at least in building. Ideally, it would even be in unit. That's kind of what we have right now. Another thing that was important to us was that we wouldn't be climbing a bunch of stairs to get into or out of our unit. So the maximum we were looking for was a 3-floor walk-up. Ideally, it would be a 2-floor walk-up, or it would have an elevator in the building. Another really important thing that we wanted was to have a space to host maybe 8 to 10 people for dinner comfortably around a dining room table. Currently in our apartment in New York, we don't really have the space for that. It's just a little bit too small. So we really wanted to make it worth the effort to move by having more common space so that we can host people more easily and comfortably. Now, once you go ahead and finalize your criteria, make sure to put that into Street Easy and set daily alerts to get notified when new listings that fit your criteria hit the market. It is important that you make it a practice to look at your alerts every single day and to reach out to the agent to schedule time to look at viable options. A pro tip that I have for you here is basically to try to schedule back-to-back listings during a time that you are going to be in the neighborhood so you can hit multiple listings at once. Now that we have gone through some tips and advice for the actual apartment hunting process, let's talk a little bit about neighborhoods. Some of the best neighborhoods that I think one should live in your 20s and 30s, it's basically Lower Manhattan and parts of Brooklyn. In Lower Manhattan, I feel like the places to go and check out are the West Village, the East Village, Chelsea, Nolita, basically like anywhere within Lower Manhattan in that kind of general area. The reason is because there's so many great places to eat, so many cute boutiques. They're just all really trendy, and also there's a great nightlife that exists out there. The Brooklyn equivalents are essentially Williamsburg, Greenpoint, and Dumbo. Highly recommend those areas too if you're in your 20s and 30s for the same kind of vibe, just on the Brooklyn side. I really zeroed in on Nolita and the West Village. We absolutely loved some of the options that we saw when we went to the Nolita. The general price points that we saw for a 1-bedroom, 1-bath was like $4,500 to $5,500, but there were some really solid options that were closer to the $4,500 range. I can't say the same about the West Village. The West Village is like Nolita, except I would say a little bit more elevated and a little bit more refined and bougie. And it was definitely reflected in the price. I think we saw 2 apartments that were $4,500 a month, and the square footage of these apartments was probably 400 square feet. It was microscopic and definitely only meant for one person. Also, all the appliances were basically like shrunken into mini sizes. I kid you not, there was one place that we saw where the fridge was basically a mini fridge. The dishwasher was just kind of a pull-out drawer. The oven was also like just this tiny little box. I'm glad that they had it, but it was really like tiny. And also located on a 5th floor walk-up, which, as I mentioned in my criteria, doesn't quite work for us. Moving over to the Brooklyn side of things, we did check out a couple of options in Dumbo. I really like Dumbo as an option because it is just a 15-minute train ride to Lower Manhattan. So you have that proximity, but on top of that, you have a beautiful waterfront view and skyline view of Manhattan. If you have not checked out Brooklyn Bridge Park, you must go check it out because it has some of the most incredible views. Dumbo, pricing wise, is like not that much cheaper than the things that we saw in Lower Manhattan. The pricing was also about like $4,500 to $5,500, but I would say that the amenities and the space was better. Like you didn't have as many old options, old like units and buildings, because that area was kind of built up in the last like 20 years. So you had like more new build options. The layouts and the square footage was a little bit better. It's also a little bit more quiet. I kind of liked that too. So I really liked Dumbo. We saw some great options there. And we also checked out some options in downtown Brooklyn as well, because there are some really great deals that are happening right now in the area, in new builds, and we just wanted to go and check that out. Now for the $1 million question, did we find our new home? Yes, we did! What I can say about this new home is that it pretty much meets almost all the criteria that we had, and I'm excited to kind of just share a little bit more about it, why it works for us, and how that might kind of influence what might work for you. Okay guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope that this video was genuinely helpful to you. All of the advice, all of the insights I shared today is essentially just a compilation of everything that my friends have shared with me and that I have used successfully. If you have any questions for me, feel free to drop it in the comments section. I'm happy to follow up and answer them. And if you are curious about what my next home might look like, follow me, because I will be posting an apartment tour at some point soon once we move in, and I will certainly be posting and sharing a moving out video with my current apartment. So I'll kind of go through why we love the space, why we're moving out, and kind of give you a look into a 500 square foot apartment in New York. If you're curious, follow along, and I'll see you in the next video.